Hello everybody and welcome back for another video. Today it's going to be part 2 of the Golden Age amusement parks and infantoriums. Now just for a recap of the previous video, we were looking into these amusement parks which were springing up, according to the official narrative, all over the country between 1900 and 1915, with an estimated 2,000 such parks from coast to coast. Now you had as many, as I just said, 2,000 parks once operated. Now they operated typically at the ends of various streetcar lines around the country. And this is just an example of one of those parks called Forest Park in Chicago. At nighttime, they were quite the sight. But the official narrative tells us that since most people didn't have vehicles until the 1920s, these trolley companies who own the streetcar lines, they wanted people to use the streetcar lines on the weekends. So they decided to build all of these parks at the end of the streetcar lines to get the people to come out on the weekends and use the streetcar lines. So a lot of these parks will also go by the name of trolley parks. But you have parks called, the electric companies apparently bought streetcar lines. So a lot of these parks are called electric parks, trolley parks, but you've also got many other names like White City Amusement Parks, Luna Parks, Dreamland, just to name a few. So that pretty much catches us up from last episode, but I found an article. These mechanical wonderlands also often operated like small self-contained towns with their own electrical and plumbing systems. Now, this is at a time, turn of the century, most homes didn't have electricity, but you had these parks operating like self-contained towns. And I would say most of these parks had upwards of 100,000 to 500,000 lights associated with them, which is just an unbelievable number, but that's what you had according to the narrative. And this is a particular electric park known as the Coney Island of Southwest Missouri. You can see here by the picture, quite an impressive sight at nighttime. This park was in Joplin, Missouri, and it was referred to as an electric park as well. This structure here is an electric tower, which I'm going to show you a close-up of. This is the electric tower that was in that park in Joplin, Missouri. This kind of caught my attention just because the parks in question, they have these towers almost always right next to water, which doesn't seem like an accident, and I think there might be a function behind that. So I decided to start taking a look at some of the layouts of these parks, and there's oddly a lot of consistency. But just before we get into that, I just wanted to show you one image of a particular park. This is an electric park that existed in Galveston, Texas. You can see here what it looked like on the right at nighttime. At nighttime, though, impressive. This is what it looked like on the left during the day. This is that circle swing here. I just wanted to kind of give you a little before and after of what one of these electric parks looked like. So now let's take a look at some of these parks and just start making some observations on their layout, what's in them. So I decided to start with this White City Amusement Park in Chicago. This ride's called the Chutes. It would empty into a lagoon. You have a tower, typically right at the end or next to that lagoon. There always seems to be an octagon, pretty close, and you've got this circle swing. This was a park called Wonderland, Minneapolis, St. Paul. So previous one was a White City Amusement Park. This is a Wonderland, but again, the Chutes emptying into a lagoon. Can't tell if that's an octagon, but an interesting placement nonetheless. And you have an electric tower here. Here's that circle swing. This park is called, this is another White City amusement park in Louisville, Kentucky. The Chutes ride. Here's the lagoon. Here's an octagon. I believe this is an eagle with outstretched wings, or some type of bird with outstretched wings. I'm going to show you another image of this. But on the left, you've got these circle swings. We're still at that White City Amusement Park in Louisville, Kentucky. We're just looking at a different vantage point. Here's that octagonal structure. And this is about as good of an image as unfortunately I could get, but some type of bird with outstretched wings on top of an octagon. Here's the electric tower behind it. So I'm just questioning, is there some function to this form? Or is it just everyone decided just to replicate this one design? This is a dreamland park at night, Coney Island. Here's that Chutes ride into the lagoon. Here's the electric tower. And you had these parks all across North America. This is in Montreal. This park was called Dominion Park. The Chutes ride, the lagoon, the electric tower, the circle swing. Couldn't find the octagon, but a lot of similar components. This is still Dominion Park, just a different vantage point. Here you can see the lagoon and the tower. This is still Dominion Park. This is an untouched photo as far as, obviously it's not colorized. I just wanted to throw that in there. This is still Dominion Park. Now, another park in Toronto, or in Canada, sorry. This one's in Toronto, called Scarborough Beach Park. Again, here's that ride called the Chutes. There's a lagoon you can't see. You've got this electric tower at the end of that lagoon. This is the same park called Scarborough Beach Park. We're just at a different vantage point on the other side of this tower, this electric tower. Here's that Chutes ride, and you can't see the lagoon here. Now, after looking at several of these parks, I just noticed there's a lot of similarities even with these towers. So first, let's take a look at this. This was the Wonderland Park at night. When you're looking at this tower, just some basic observations. You've got this diamond pattern, what looks like an anchor. Interesting pattern up top, but the anchor, diamond, and you've got, looks like 3 rows of some pattern here. Now, when I was looking, this was that Scarborough Beach Park in Toronto. It's kind of hard to make it up, but Scarboro. This says Toronto under it, Beach Park. And when you take a look at this particular tower, here's that diamond pattern, anchor. This at the very top looks very similar. Now there only appears to be about, I can't really make out what this pattern is, but there's 3 rows, but there's only 4 of these items in each row. Here it looks like there's 5, but there's 3 rows. So you've got basically identical towers. The base even seems identical. 2 totally different parks, Wonderland. This is a Scarborough Beach Park, 2 different countries. Now, we can even throw this Dominion Park into the mix. Unfortunately, this picture's not the best, but you have this diamond pattern, and looks like there's 3 rows of some type of pattern. Can't really make out anything up top, but even the base looks similar. So you've got these 3 parks who, I mean, they're not supposed to be affiliated in any real way, but there's all this commonality. So I wanted just to see who owned these parks. The first park, the Wonderland Park, which would be the one on the left here, it was privately owned, according to the narrative, by this individual, H.A. Dorsey. Okay, so you got a private owner for that park. The second park, the Scarborough Beach Park, was owned by the Toronto Park Company, who supposedly purchased 42 acres of this farm. So that would be this one, okay? So the Toronto Park Company owns this one, a private owner owns this one. Let's look at the Dominion Park. Dominion Park was owned by the Montreal Suburban Tramway and Power Company. Okay, so you've got three different entities involved here, two different companies, private owner, two different countries, different geographical areas, but they're all replicating almost identically. Not only the layout of the park, but these towers almost appear to be identical. So just an observation. Are they ordering out of a catalog? I don't know, but there's, it's the evolution of these parks that is interesting to me because there is no evolution. It's the World Fair, 1893 in Chicago. You have the first sort of amusement park. Then the Coney Island parks, late 1890s, early 1900s. And then supposedly all of these guys copied the Coney Island parks. There's like no evolution. It's just everyone decides, let's have this ride called the Chutes with the lagoon, the towers, the electric, the circle swings, the octagons. It's perplexing to me. But anyway, I came across one more image, and this is a White City amusement park. Another one of these White City amusement parks, Savin Rock, Connecticut. Here's the lagoon. Now this tower, it has a slightly different pattern, but you got rows of something, and you've got two of these diamond patterns as opposed to just one. And I've got some more images of this particular electric tower. I wish I had a real HD black and white, but we'll have to settle for these. Now the base is identical, but you've got different patterns and rows. This is what it looked like at night. I don't know if this means anything. This is just me sharing some observations. This is the only real, true, untouched image I could find of that electric tower, Savin Rock, New Haven, Connecticut, in this White City amusement park. Not that clear, but I don't know what to make of all this. Maybe there's no meaning to it. There's a simple explanation. It's just a lack of evolution that makes me question all this. Everything in these large numbers, and there is these same patterns that just keep popping up over and over. Different companies, different people who own them, and you have the same repeating patterns. So just wanted to show you that. And I think what we'll do now is take a look at the entrances to some of these parks, which I find interesting as well. So let's have a look at that. The next thing I'd like to briefly touch on are some of these entrances to the parks, and in particularly mostly at the Luna parks. So what you have here is nighttime scene. This is the Coney Island Luna Park, and it just looks like an over-the-top scene at the moment. Now this is the same entrance, I believe, but during the day. Now when you go to some of the other entrances of that Luna Park, you have this interesting, to me anyway, this configuration of 4 antennae that are flanking this orb, as it turns out, in this particular configuration. And I don't think these are flagpoles, so to me there's a function and a purpose behind this design. Now, there's Luna Park in Pittsburgh as well, and instead of 4 antenna, you have 4 orbs surrounding this orb here. But it's in the same configuration, and I just wanted to point out they spelled Pittsburgh wrong here. There's supposed to be an H. So, and why I think that's kind of interesting is just because everything else I've noticed on this particular entrance, there are lights that are affixed to, these are all lights. Lights everywhere, except the only thing that doesn't have lights affixed to it is the actual sign. You can see the difference between these and these. Lights, no lights. So I'm even wondering, was the park here already? Was it called something else? And they just tried to fit Pittsburgh in and call it a Luna Park? I don't know. That's kind of a wild speculation on my part, but just something to note. Now, there's also a Luna Park, Cleveland. Again, this same configuration. This is a Luna Park in Seattle. And now they've gone back to this one has antenna again with little orbs at the top, but antenna surrounding this central orb here. In this next shot, they've just removed the antenna. They've removed these antenna in this shot. So I find that kind of interesting because it's not only Luna Parks. This is a Wonderland Park called Revere Beach. This is the Wonderland Park, sorry, in Revere Beach, Massachusetts. And you've got 4 antenna, but instead of these antenna surrounding an orb, there's a cupola that has its own antenna. So I think this design, I think there's a function to this particular configuration. And when you start looking at, there's something called the Five Pagoda Temple, and it just refers to several temples in China that were constructed following the architectural design of a diamond-throned pagoda inspired by the Indian Mahabodhi temple. So you have these temples in China which also have a similar configuration. Now here's the configuration. Now I'm of the belief too that temples, churches, there's an energetic principle to those structures that that's missing today, I believe anyway. So yeah, I just find it interesting that this particular configuration shows up at these amusement parks, it shows up at these temples, and this is just one particular temple. I think this is the Mahabodhi temple in India, but you can, if you really magnify on this particular finial at the top here, but they're also running a wire down from the top of this, so, and that's as far down as we can go. But it's just another aspect of these parks. Some of the entrances I find very interesting, the configurations. And another park I wanted to point out real quick, there was this park called Melville Park in Bayonne, New Jersey. And not only does it seem to have, I can't tell if that's an angel or a bird, but again, you got the outstretched wings. It's a recurring theme. But you also have this sphere, the sphere with an antenna, but again, we're using it as a flagpole. And I think there might be something more to this as well, because we're gonna take a look. There's a Russian blog that I referred to in the previous video, and they mentioned there's a portion of it that kind of refers to something that looks like this. But I also saw this in another park in Kansas City, an electric park in Kansas City. You have the similar design show up. Now, where I'm going with this is if we go back and take a look at some of the images from this Russian blog, they talk about these ships that were probably around between 1850 and 1900. There were some of these ships that didn't have sails or any sort of smokestack or exhaust pipes to indicate it was steam powered. So there's no obvious form of propulsion for these ships, but they have this interesting design configuration at the top, and there appears to be a wire that's running across them as well. And again, here the same design, no sails and no exhaust pipes. So it doesn't appear to be steam powered or wind powered. It's an interesting aspect to this, and this is just another photo. And this is in English here, but this is a ship that's docked, and you got this wire running in between. But you got this sort of similar situation that we see with some of these parks. So is there something to that? And again, the outstretched wing, sometimes some people suggest that indicates active charge, so to speak, with some of these parks. So I don't know. Is there something to all this? Maybe. I just wanted to point it out. I thought it was kind of interesting. The last aspect of these parks that I'd like to touch on is this concept of infantoriums. An infantorium is just a hospital-like facility filled with incubators, which were a new technology, turn of the century, containing tiny babies who were born prematurely. Now, you would expect something like this to evolve in a hospital, but for some reason, these infantoriums were in amusement parks. And for a small fee, people at the park could go and see these premature infants in the incubators. Now, I don't know, that doesn't sound like something I would like to do, but this is what was happening apparently. And I didn't know this, but apparently only 5% of all babies around the turn of the century were born in hospitals. So interesting statistic. And also, I think prior to incubators, only, according to the statistics, only 15% of all premature infants survived. But after the incubators, that number went up to 85%. So wonderful technology, but just seems really bizarre to me that it all of this evolved in amusement parks, and this technology was showcased in amusement parks and not hospitals. And the numbers they give us are that among approximately 80,000 premature infants were treated in amusement parks and fairs in Europe and the US between 1896 and 1944. Now, another interesting component to this is they admit that a percentage of this 80,000 were foundlings. So premature infants who were just given, or so we're told, just given away freely, and the records are long gone. So we'll never know what percentage of this 80,000 were foundlings. The price of admission, so you would pay 5 cents, whatever it was, 10 cents, 20 cents. The price of admission paid for the staff, and the parents owed the park nothing for the care of the baby. So it's everything sounds good. It's just the manner in which the association with as an exhibit and people gawking and all of this sort of thing, it just doesn't quite sit right with me. But the technology, it saved lives. So that all sounds good. And here are just some pictures of what an inside of an infantorium might look like. These are the incubators. Just some more images. Now, this person here, this Dr. Martin Cooney, is supposed to be the mastermind behind this entire movement, so to speak, behind these infantoriums. And we're going to talk about him in a second. But before I get to him, another thing that strikes me as odd about these infantoriums is the way they were labeled. Now, this one, nothing wrong, thankfully. But when you look at a lot of these infantoriums and the signs, infant incubators with living infants. There's just something that just seems so odd that you would need to specify living infants. I understand the mortality rate was high for premature babies, but if you were someone who went to go see an exhibit, would you expect that the infant wouldn't be alive? It just seems like that's not even in the realm of possibility. So really bizarre sign to me. This is just a different, in a different amusement park, infant incubator, living baby again. This is another park in Coney Island, infant incubators with, there's an L here, you can't see, but again, living infants. And this is just another one, incubators with living babies. Just weird, just really weird. Baby incubators with living babies. Man, that is strange. Now, another strange aspect to these parks is the mastermind behind all this, Dr. Martin Cooney. He apparently just thought it was a great technology, and he pushed the hospital supposedly didn't want anything to do with it. So he worked his way into getting these exhibits in the amusement parks. And I think he started off in Coney Island. And Infantoriums spread from there to different amusement parks. But there's an interesting thing about Dr. Martin Cooney, and that is somebody wrote a book called The Strange Case of Dr. Cooney. Now, the interesting thing about him is he's not even a doctor. The man who ran a carnival attraction that saved thousands of premature babies wasn't a doctor at all. Now that adds a little element to this whole story. People speculate Martin Cooney might not have been an actual doctor. And if you even look up Wikipedia, Martin Cooney was a physician. However, there is good reason to believe he was not a trained medical doctor at all. So just another weird element to this whole story. And the estimate of prematurely born babies whose lives he saved is between 6,500 and 7,000. So again, at the end of the day, it sounds like he did a lot of good, but there are just elements to the story that it seems strange, the whole evolution of it. I'm going to leave it here for now, but I hope you enjoyed this episode, and until next time, take care. Bye.
Reserve some for the foundlings.
As it should always be. The foundlings are the future. This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.